I have a question about false beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Identify you have a false belief and you feel the error in it, and at the end of it you sort of get some understanding of why it's there.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked before about now replacing that with truth, the truth, God's truth.
Well, as we've just been saying, you can't replace it. You've got to let it go first.
Yep.
So, you know, the laws that govern the way your soul works mean that while you have a belief of one kind that is false on on a certain type of issue, you will never be able to absorb the truth on that same issue while that belief remains inside of you. You're just not ever going to. You can, you know, there's a whole lot of techniques nowadays people use, like, you know, what do they call it, where they, you know, remind themselves every day, affirmational type of techniques, but also they call it neuro-linguistic programming, and there's a lot of new age sort of things that have been, and designed by psychologists frequently, to try to reprogram a person into a different course of action. Cognitive therapy, yeah, all that stuff. None of it works, because unless you let go of the false, you will never be able to absorb the true. Mm-hmm. And the process of letting go of the false is not an intellectual process. Mm-hmm. It's an emotional one. So the false faith, you could say the faith that's in error, or what we called in the last assistant group, the corrupt faith. And that has to be, you've got to go through an emotional process to let it go. Mm. If you don't do that emotional process, you will not let it go. And it doesn't matter how much somebody sits down with you and tries to convince you otherwise, you will not be able to hear it. And you will not be able to work your way through it. And it's an emotional process, whether the law demands the emotion from you or whether you go through the process emotionally through a voluntary effort. Mm. So the law of compensation demands this emotional process. That's why everybody who's been through the law of compensation says it's a painful process, because the pain is the emotional pain that they have experiencing the error going away. Mm-hmm. So it's an emotional process no matter which way you progress. One way you can get God's help, obviously. The other way is that you're by yourself with the law. But either way, you're going to be faced with some emotion. So the sooner you recognise voluntarily going through emotion is better than being forced upon you, the better off your life will be. But on every single issue where you have a false faith, you're not going to be able to get a true faith unless that false faith is released emotionally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
But that's not something that happens just because you release the false faith.
The true one coming, you mean?
Yeah.
That's right. You've got to also want the true one, don't you?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So you can actually go through an emotional process of releasing a false one and actually be left with no faith at all. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's not advisable, because no faith usually means no desire, and usually means a very passive life. But
so in